The story starts with an animated sequence called Me and My Shadow. In this Looney Tunes-style cartoon short, the Joker is a famous celebrity getting ready for a show. However, his shadow rebels, mimicking his persona and causing chaos. It injures people and steps onto the stage pretending to be the real Joker. While Joker fights to regain control, the police arrive and brutally beat him. In the next scene, Arthur Fleck is in Arkham State Hospital, where he's been locked up for 2 years due to his crimes. One morning, the guards wake him up for a meeting with his lawyer. "Feeling crazy today, Arthur?" One guard jokes as they drag him out of bed. "Got a joke for us?" Arthur replies, "Sure. A guy's dog dies, so he goes to a church and asks the priest for a funeral. The priest says, 'We don't do services for animals.' The guy asks, 'Do you think $2,000 would be enough to cover it?' The priest says, 'Why didn't you tell me the dog was Catholic?' The guards laugh as they take him to meet Miss Stewart, his lawyer. On the way, they pass a music class. A young woman named Harleen Quinzel, also known as Lee, notices Arthur, points her finger like a gun at her head, and pretends to shoot. Arthur smiles at her before continuing on. When they reach Miss Stewart, she scolds the guards for not giving Arthur an umbrella in the rain. She explains that Doctor believes Arthur developed a split personality, his Joker persona, due to childhood trauma. This personality, she says, is responsible for his crimes. Dr. Batty wants to record an interview with Arthur to assess his mental state for a proper trial. Miss Stewart begins the discussion, asking about key incidents. "Let's start with the subway. Do you remember the 3 men who bullied you? Did you black out? What about Murray Franklin? Do you remember being on his show?" Arthur smiles faintly. "My mum and I used to watch him. She'd say, 'He's so handsome.' I still hear her voice sometimes." Miss Stewart presses on, asking if his Joker side became more active after his mother's death. Arthur doesn't answer directly but stares off, lost in thought. The next day, Arthur is taken to the music class, where he receives a warm welcome. While the guards are distracted, he meets Lee. She tells him she burned down her parents' apartment, which got her sent to the facility. She jokes darkly, "Knock knock, who's there? Your dad's dead in a car accident." Her blunt humor makes Arthur laugh. Later, Arthur is informed that he's been deemed mentally fit for trial. The news announces the decision, while Assistant DA Harvey Dent holds a press conference, stating that the state will seek the death penalty for Arthur. The story picks up with Harvey Dent publicly calling Arthur a monster, while his supporters in Gotham continue to wreak havoc in his name, seeing him as a martyr. Later, Jackie takes Arthur to a screening of The Bandwagon. Arthur sits with Lee, who suggests they go outside together. Arthur warns her that if he leaves, the guards will shoot them. He returns to watching the movie, ignoring Lee's attempts to get closer. Frustrated, Lee walks to the back of the theater to smoke. She lights a match and casually drops it, starting a fire in the theater. As the flames spread, panic starts, and the crowd rushes to escape. In this chaos, Arthur and Lee seize the opportunity to sneak out of the building. Outside, they sing and dance together. However, their escape is short-lived. The guards catch up and drag them back to their cells. Later that night, Arthur dreams he's on stage as the Joker, performing alongside Lee, who sings a heartfelt song about her love for him. Later, Lee visits Arthur in his cell, saying the guards allowed her in. She reveals that she's being sent back home, as the administration considers Arthur a bad influence on her. Despite this, she's happy that she'll be able to attend his trial every day. Before leaving, Lee decides to get closer to Arthur's true self. She takes out a bag of makeup she smuggled in and paints his face like a clown. The two share an intimate moment before she departs. A few days later, Miss Stewart arranges for Arthur to be interviewed by TV personality Patty. She advises Arthur to act like his real self and explain that his Joker persona is responsible for his crimes. During the interview, Patty questions Arthur about the night he killed Murray Franklin. "What was going through your mind when you pulled out that gun?" Arthur hesitates, claiming he barely remembers. "You did it on live TV, pal," Patty presses. "That's as real as it gets. Do you deserve to die for it?" Arthur insists. "That's not who I am anymore. That was the Joker, not me." Patty challenges him further. "You're saying this other personality did it? Do you even care about what you've done?" Arthur deflects, saying the focus should be on who he is now, not his past. He concludes, "I'm not alone anymore." When the interview airs, Lee watches it from outside a TV shop. Seeing Arthur singing for her on screen, she impulsively breaks the glass, steals the TV, and takes it with her. Days later, Arthur's trial begins. He's brought to court under heavy security, with the courtroom packed and tensions high. The prosecution starts by calling a psychiatrist as an expert witness. Dr. Liu testifies that Arthur does not have multiple personality disorder, stating that his crimes were intentional, and his Joker persona is just an act. When it's Miss Stewart's turn, she points out that Dr. Liu only spent 89 minutes interviewing Arthur, hardly enough time for a thorough diagnosis. She reveals Arthur's traumatic childhood, during which he suffered physical abuse, suggesting this led him to create the Joker persona as a coping mechanism. Miss Stewart argues that the Joker personality emerged after Arthur endured years of trauma and bullying, including the incident with the 3 drunk men on the subway. She reminds the court of Arthur's abusive upbringing and mental struggles, highlighting how these factors contributed to his actions. The court then dismisses. The next day, Miss Stewart visits Arthur and tells him they have a strong chance of winning the case, but warns that Lee could jeopardize everything. Arthur defends Lee, claiming she's just like him and has his best interests at heart. Miss Stewart then reveals startling truths about Lee. She comes from a wealthy family, her father is a living doctor, and she voluntarily committed herself to Arkham, but later checked herself out. Lee never set fire to any apartment and even attended graduate school to study psychiatry. Arthur retreats into his imagination, where he envisions himself performing a stage song with Lee. The song begins as a declaration of love, but Arthur feels Lee is stealing the spotlight. In the vision, Lee points a gun at Arthur and shoots him, leaving him dazed and questioning her betrayal. Back in reality, Arthur is in the asylum when Jackie tells him Lee has come to visit. Arthur confronts Lee, asking if she lied to him. Lee admits she did, explaining she just wanted to get closer to him. She felt like she hadn't accomplished anything in her life compared to Arthur. She reveals she watched the TV movie about him 20 times. When Arthur asks why, she claims it was great but adds, "They're laughing at you in there. They don't care about you." Suddenly, Lee announces she's pregnant, shocking Arthur. The next day, the trial continues, and the prosecution calls Sophie, Arthur's former neighbor, to testify. Sophie recounts how Arthur once broke into her apartment, but admits she didn't report it to the police. When Harvey Dent asks if this behavior shows a split personality, Sophie says she didn't know Arthur well enough to say. However, Sophie reveals she had a friendly relationship with Penny, Arthur's mother, who told her Arthur was mentally disturbed and has built his whole life around this made-up story. Penny used to think that his son is not funny at all. During the testimony, Arthur grows frustrated and declares, "I can't do this anymore. I want to fire my lawyer." The courtroom erupts into chaos, forcing the session to adjourn. Arthur is taken back to his holding cell, where Lee visits him. She praises him for his boldness, claiming the audience supports him. Later, a radio broadcast reveals the judge has reluctantly allowed Arthur to represent himself in court, despite opposition from both Miss Stewart and Harvey Dent. When Arthur returns to the asylum, the inmates cheer for him, creating a frenzy that forces the guards to intervene. The next day, Arthur arrives at court dressed in his Joker persona. During the hearing, Harvey Dent calls Gary Puddles, one of Arthur's former co-workers, as a witness. Gary testifies that he saw Arthur murder Randall. Instead of defending himself, Arthur mocks Gary's name, saying, "Puddles? Really? Is that your actual name?" He then twists the questioning to make a spectacle of the trial, claiming, "Nobody knew I existed before. But look around now. I'm free." Arthur's antics stir mixed reactions, with some criticizing him as doomed for the death penalty, while others remain captivated by his charisma. A reporter asks him what he would do if released. Arthur, in his imaginative world, looks at Lee and begins singing, "We're going to build a mountain from a little hill," envisioning himself performing alongside her. In this fantasy, he even marries her. Back in reality, Arthur is sent to Arkham Asylum. Furious guards, insulted by his antics on live TV, attack him and beat him viciously. The next day, during his final court appearance, Arthur is once again dressed as the Joker. Judge Herman allows him to give his closing statement. Arthur, instead of blaming society or acting as the Joker, surprises everyone. He confesses to the murders, including his mother's, and admits the Joker persona was a fantasy he created to cope with his life. "I wish I could take it all back," he says tearfully. His supporters, including Lee, are disappointed and leave the courtroom. Shortly after, the jury declares Arthur guilty of first-degree murder. As he waits for the verdict to be finalized, Arthur tries to reach out to Lee. He leaves her a voicemail, pleading for her not to abandon him. However, Lee, overwhelmed by disappointment, doesn't respond. When the police escort Arthur out of the courtroom, a blast occurs. His supporters attempt to rescue, smuggling him into a car. But as tensions escalate, Arthur realizes their devotion was built on the very fantasy he just denounced. "There is no Joker," he whispers. "It was all just a lie," and he runs away. He meets Lee, but Lee doesn't want him back as she just wanted Joker and chaos in the world. The police eventually capture him and send him back to Arkham. Days later, a guard informs Arthur he has a visitor. On his way, he encounters a young inmate who offers to tell him a joke. Intrigued, Arthur listens. The inmate begins, "A psychopath walks into a bar and sees his famous clown sitting there all alone. I used to watch you on TV. What can I get you? If you're buying, I'll take what I deserve." Before Arthur can react, the inmate stabs him, laughing maniacally. As Arthur collapses, the young man carves a smile into his own face with the knife, symbolizing the birth of a new Joker. And that's how the movie ends, with the mantle of the Joker passing to someone new. If you enjoyed this recap, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more awesome content. Be sure to check out our recap of the first Joker movie on our channel. Trust us, it's way better than this one. As always, thanks for watching.